Welcome to rePROs Fight Back, a podcast on all things related to sexual and reproductive health rights and justice. Hi, rePROs. How's everybody doing? I'm your host, Jenny Wetter, and my pronouns are she, her. So y'all, I feel like there is so much happening right now, and one of the big things is the administration announced a really expanded version of the global gag rule. I could talk about it in the intro, but it's one of those things, like, I think we're going to do a deep dive on it. And so instead of trying to get y'all to understand it in like a 2-second clip in my intro, let's just we'll do an episode on it as soon as I can get some people on to talk about it. So hopefully very, very soon. And then we'll do a fuller dive into why this is so terrible and so bad. But so let's turn to something brighter. And it's something I think I didn't talk to y'all about, so last year I took 2 big fun trips. My mom and I did a Viking cruise exploring the British Isles. And then I went with one of my aunts and 2 of my cousins and did a tour of Italy. And, you know, I really love taking pictures. It's something I really enjoy. I got a really nice new camera this year before the first trip, and I took so many pictures on both of the trips. And so often, like, our pictures just live in online albums, or I have like an Aura frame that I have a number of my favorite ones loaded onto. But so often we don't like print out a bunch of pictures anymore. So anyway, my mom really, what she does after she takes big trips is she'll put like a photo album together on Shutterfly and get it printed out, like a photo album, like a literal book. And so she put one together for our trip to the British Isles and the trip I took to Italy. And so she took all of the pictures that I took and my cousins and my aunt took and put them into an album of our trip. And so I got them when I went home for Christmas. And so I have really been enjoying having like a physical thing to look through and like remember the trips. And so it just made me really think that that's something I need to do more of, is put like photo books together on Shutterfly or something. And this is not sponsored. This is just what I happen to use. Marking all of these things so they're just not this online album that I never look at. But I have the thing on my bookshelf. So I know actually many of you probably don't know this, but I have this like feels weird to talk about. So if somebody were to tell you to like picture a beach, can you like see it? I can't. Like I my brain doesn't work that way. So when I dream, it's like narrative. I don't see pictures. I can't do imagery in my head. And so it's nice to have that thing to look at so I can see the images from my trips again. I don't know. It just feels extra special since I can't relive them by just trying to bring them up in my head. So I think I'm going to take some of my online albums that I have and put some more books together so that I have ones of like all of my favorite pictures I've taken. Like I said, I really love taking photos, so I have some really great shots that shouldn't just live online. I should have physical copies of. So that is something I'm looking forward to doing, is starting to put some of that stuff together and getting them printed out so that I can enjoy them in ways that I can't when they just live online. So maybe that'll be my new little cozy distraction that I do while all of the chaos surrounds us. So I think, though, that's like the big thing I've been thinking about. I've just really been enjoying those little photo albums. They've made me happy. With that, I think I want to turn to this week's episode. It's a little longer again because, seriously, you can't put Jessica, Mason Pieklo, and I in a call together and not have it go a little long, because I always love talking to her about honestly anything. So we have a great conversation today. It's a little wide-ranging, talking about the SCOTUS cases from when you hear this 2 weeks ago that looked at trans girls playing sports. We talk about 1 year in and the Trump admin and the Roe v. Wade marker that happened. That was also last week when you're hearing this. Yeah, so it's a little all over the place, but it is a wonderful conversation, as it always is when I get to talk to Jessica Mason Pieklo with Boom Lawyered Podcast and Rewire News Group. And with that, let's go to my interview with Jess. Hi, Jess. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's always such a pleasure.
I'm really excited to talk to you. There's like a hodgepodge of things going on that we like need to check in. I mean, honestly, there's like a gajillion things we could talk about, but like we'll narrow and focus on the ones most relevant to this podcast. Let's start with the Supreme Court. There was a big case around trans girls playing sports, or cases. Can you tell us about that? We didn't do a pre-episode on it, other than maybe when you and I talked before the SCOTUS term.
Yeah, you and I chatted about these cases a little bit because at the time, we didn't even know if the court was going to hear both of them or what was going to happen. So in the middle of January, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in a case that was challenging Idaho's ban on trans girls playing sports and West Virginia's ban on trans girls playing sports. And you know, what to say about these cases? Collectively, they ask the legal question of whether or not categorical bans on trans girls playing sports that align with their gender identity, and if those violate the Equal Protection Clause and Title IX of the Civil Rights Act. And Title IX is the federal law that grants equal opportunity in education on the basis of sex. And it is a part of a series of federal statutes that were designed to address segregation in public spaces like education. Title VI is a comparative statute that addresses equal opportunity in education on race. They were passed together and are often not discussed together, but I think it's important, given what these cases pose a threat to start to stitch those statutes back together. So these cases, like I said, involve categorical bans on trans girls. And I think it's important to point out that these are bans on trans girls, not bans on trans boys, for example, trans girls participating in sports. And in the oral arguments, we heard a lot of concerns from the conservatives about protecting women's sports, protecting women's spaces, competitive disadvantage or advantage based on physical difference. And all of it led to an exchange that was so alarming, even Amy Coney Barrett stepped back and said, what are we doing here? So in the conversation about sports was a lot of gender essentialism. Are men stronger? Are men faster? Are men more competitive? And when you're talking about something like football or hockey, sure, maybe there are some differences between women and men in terms of physicality. The law already contemplates how to address that, right? We got that. That conversation then led to, okay, well, if we start mandating sex segregation in these places, where does it stop? Do we then get a boys-only chess club? And the attorneys defending the state bans out of Idaho and West Virginia said, you know what, maybe we do.
And like, honestly, that's not hypothetical, right? Like, I feel like we have heard in some of the like governing chess bodies talking about this. Or isn't there even, did a ban go into place?
Yes. So this is a very live debate that has been going on under the radar for most of us, but is truly a canary in the coal mine moment. Okay, so the International Chess Federation has in place a ban on trans women participating in chess events that are women only. And the women only chess events exist because chess has been historically dominated by men, not because men are smarter or better at strategy or can move the little chess pieces around more effectively than women can, but because they weren't allowed. It was no girls allowed. It was a boys only club, right? And so in the spirit of opening spaces up, there were programs and competitions designed to get more women into the sport. This got caught up in the trans panic. And so now there is a ban on trans women competing in women's only. Why? To what end? What are we doing here? And so, if you have people in your family who are a little uneasy with the idea of trans girls competing on girls' sports teams. Maybe they're like, soccer feels a little rough. Like, what do we do here? And it's not straight up bigotry, it's unease. People are learning into this space in some communities. I think suggesting that these bans are about way more than football or soccer or hockey. I mean, Becky Pepper Jackson, who is the now teenage girl at the center of the West Virginia case, just wanted to run track with her friends. This poor girl was admittedly not very good at track. She was not displacing, tens and thousands of student athletes in West Virginia. She was one trans kid who wanted to play a sport with her friends, and the West Virginia legislature turned its entire power on her all the way to the Supreme Court. So I've been rambling, but my point really is for folks who are catching up on these cases is that this isn't about sports. It's about reintroducing segregation into public spaces. And I can put some context on this. I'm almost 52 years old. In my lifetime, it was not possible for women to open bank accounts in their own name. They needed a male cosigner. In my lifetime, it was not possible for women to have their own credit cards. Title IX is one of the reasons why women have developed the level of economic independence that we have collectively. And it's still not at par with men. And I'm still talking largely about the gains of white women in this economy, because what we know is Black and brown women have made gains, but they have not made gains in the same way as white women. This conversation at the Supreme Court around trans sports and the role of Title IX in creating access to opportunity is happening at a time when over 300,000 women have been kicked out of the workforce as a result of Trump administration policies, where Black women in particular have been pushed out of the economy at the highest levels we have seen. There is a clear effort to resegregate the economy. And these trans sports cases are part of it, is the point that I'm making.
Well, and you talk about Title IX, in general, the gains that women have made in economic status, but you can also see the attacks coming in the other ways, right? Attacks on birth control and access to birth control, whether it's through policy or the misinformation you're seeing online, attacking birth control as harmful and causing problems, like things that were so important for women making economic gains are being attacked.
Absolutely. And again, just to continue to stitch the historical narrative, the legal precedent that made access to birth control possible for single women happens the same time that Congress is contemplating and passing Title IX. So this is part of the larger civil rights push in the late 60s and early 70s that really, really was about bringing, racial and gender equality specifically into a national conversation. And it was happening in the courts, and it was happening in Congress. It was happening in state legislatures as well. There were states that had advanced, policies. I'm thinking of, my current home state of Colorado, where abortion was legal long before Roe, for example. So those were active conversations. We are having active conversations about those same issues right now, except that it is in a backlash cycle. So the active conversation we are having collectively as a culture right now is about a regression of those rights, is about rolling that progress back. And again, we're not talking, hundreds of years. We're talking about, 50, 60.
Okay. I'm sure we can all guess, knowing this Supreme Court, but how did it feel like the arguments went? Was there Do you come out feeling good or bad?
Honestly, so there's no good outcome in this case, absent the Supreme Court vigorously rejecting these bans, which we know they will not do. We know that because they already allowed gender-affirming care bans that target minors in Scrimeti to take effect. There is an outward hostility and a misunderstanding of trans people by a large majority of the justices on the court. That said, I got the sincere belief that nobody wanted to be there that day during arguments making this case. And there are a couple avenues for a narrow ruling that would be devastating for the people. I need to be clear, if the Supreme Court upholds Idaho's ban and West Virginia's ban, even if we're not talking about the immediate impact on a significant number of people, upholding the ban is an act of violence. It is endorsing a segregationist policy, and one that we know will not be contained to those two states. So with those qualifications, I do see the Supreme Court crafting a narrow decision that is limited in scope to the cases and the people that were before them for that. We know the conservative legal movement has the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cases already in the legal pipeline. But we also know progressive advocates are really phenomenal fighters, and that there is an opportunity to right now use the courts as a means of harm reduction by delaying policy. And that's what we are seeing. We're seeing several advocacy groups take this tact. And so, there is place and space for advocates to still do what they need to do to protect rights and protect lives, even if the federal courts are a tool of authoritarianism right now, which they very clearly are.
Okay. So that's the first bucket of things to talk about. The next one is we're talking on January 21st, and there's a couple big markers this week. It feels wrong calling any of them anniversaries or anything that could relate happiness or celebration. We have 1 year of Trump 2.0. We have the Roe anniversary and the March for Life. How are we feeling 1 year in? And I guess because there's so much we could talk about, maybe narrowing it to things in our realm. And I'll leave that kind of broad because it is broad.
Well, the vibes are great.
Yeah.
A year in Trump 2.0 is...
how is it only a year?
Is devastating.
I've aged 10.
No, completely. That's not even a joke. I mean, I think, to really ground the conversation, because Trump 1 was devastating. Trump 2.0 is a different level of immediate horror than we've seen. And so it's helpful to think about, what were some of the first week actions that we saw this administration take. And one of the very first things that this administration did was dismantle global public health. Almost day one, if not day one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a while, and it's, we're all holding on as best we can. But that was the opening salvo for how in our issue spaces this was going to go. Global public health, and particularly global reproductive and sexual health, is such an important pillar of stability and soft power that folks don't understand, because we don't talk about it that way, because that would mean talking about all sorts of messy conversations within global sexual reproductive health, like imperialism and colonialism, that we're not quite prepared, I think, to really interrogate. But that decimation and just the total disregard for humanity in the dismantling of U.S. aid and what followed put us all on notice that this was going to be an administration not just of cruelty, but of violence, right? And it's the violence that I really want to underscore, because, dismantling U.S. aid, that's an act of violence. Occupying D.C. and Minneapolis is an act of violence. And there is a direct line between the two of them, and it's authoritarian control. And we are 1 year into it. And I am grateful for all of the activists and advocates who are making sure people are taken care of, because we are in a care for each other moment. I am desperate for an opposition party.
I feel like that was such a jarring wake-up call. I think we had like all of the like game planning of like all of the really bad things we expected like in the global repro space to happen, and like thought we were dreaming big of like how bad it could be, but like eliminating USAID in full, I don't think very many people were thinking that they could or would go that big. And so to have that be like one of the first like day one things was shocking.
Right. And I think the shock of that then reverberates in the disorganization around the opposition of what follows, because from the decimation of global and sexual reproductive health, we get the nomination of Bobby Kennedy to run HHS and the elevation of a know-nothing, quasi pseudo-populist public health movement that is grounded in grift. And we will see that play out in devastating ways over the course of the administration. I mean, I think one of the more emotionally sparkly parts of this whole thing right now is really living with the knowledge that rebuilding is a generational effort at this point. Within the first year, these folks just took a sledgehammer to programs and institutions and policies that were, in some cases, not just decades, but centuries building up to, and it doesn't make their friends at the supplement company enough money. And so we are going to dismantle it. Don't think for a second that these people care about anything other than enriching themselves and their friends.
And I think it's also just important to think of this as we were still rebuilding from the damage of Trump 1.0. Like we had never made back all of those gains or gotten policies completely back to where they needed to be. And now the thought of doing that and the institutions themselves are gone.
Right.
The people who had the knowledge and the skill have likely moved on and found new positions. So like rebuilding, I think a lot of people, I feel like we talk about this a lot when we talk about like global gag and things of like, it's not just a light switch. It's not just like, it is there or it's not there, and then tomorrow everything's back. It is, you lose all of those things and you have to rebuild. And so this is not going to be a quick or an easy fix. It is going to take a very long time to get all of these things back. And how do they come back?
Well, I mean, it's such a smart point to make, and not to try and be a, doomsday, kind of alarmist here. But again, it also is part of the conversation of the attacks on public education that are happening right now and the dismantling of the Department of Public Education, because the people who are orchestrating these attacks know what it takes to build back. And they are simultaneously doing everything that they can to make that build back impossible, making it, for example, too expensive and not available to borrow money to go to medical school. Who does that benefit, right? The caps on student borrowing that the big, beautiful bill has, put in place will absolutely further harm our public health institutions, because we will not be able to train a sufficient enough number of people and from diverse enough backgrounds. So the administration and the conservative legal movement is ensuring that the information is siloed, that it is biased. I mean, it is, not to lean into, my personality too hard, but it is the anti-abortion playbook nationalized for public health generally. And that's because that's who's in charge.
Well, and just think of all of the distrust that is being built right now. Like, HHS could tell me anything right now, and even if I know, like, it's true, like, I'm not going to believe it because, like, there's clear, like, how do you build back that trust that has been actively, like, sowed? And, like, this again, so it's not just the institution, but trust in the institutions that has been just completely blown to smithereens.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we've talked about this a little bit on the Boom Lawyered podcast in regards to the MAHA movement and its opportunistic nature. Don't think that I'm out here saying that American public health institutions are the gold standard for delivering patient care. There are a lot of people who are doing their best, but it is a for-profit medical system that has failed a lot of people. And I think there is, strength in policy in admitting where the improvements need to be. And I think that, I started in public journalism with the original fight around the Affordable Care Act. So this is, again, part of an ongoing conversation, right? The Affordable Care Act radicalized the ways that insurance companies operated in this country. That doesn't mean that necessarily your experience at, a public health institution, whether it's a minute clinic or a hospital, was fantastic. It meant that you could actually start to get consistent care, which was elevating health outcomes across the country. That's huge. That's not going to happen right now, right? And so we are in this rollback. And how do you build back trust? I mean, I really think that we are seeing this in the direct conversations and mutual aid efforts that are happening, whether we're talking about in response to, ICE occupation in Minneapolis, whether we're talking about in response to the dismantling of abortion care networks after Dobbs, since we're going to eventually get to Roe, whatever we're calling it, anniversary, flag tentpole moment, whatever it is. But we are in spaces learning that the analog contact matters and that hyperlocality is where that starts. CBS News, right? CBS News is now function of the state. It's state-run media at this point. It's the lack of institutional trust. Your hospitals, your media, your government officials, schools and universities, it's an ongoing project I may likely not see the result of in my lifetime.
Okay, so you did mention the Roe.
I tried to get us there.
Anniversary. I guess there's nothing else to say than anniversary, even though it's no longer Roe is gone. But so with that, and I even thinking through 1 year of the administration, I feel like I was also braced for some actions that we haven't seen. So not to say things are good, because they're not. So much bad has been done. But
yeah,
also just not hopeful or optimistic. Those are not the right words. But a little nugget of surprised of things that we haven't seen that they could have done, which is, I guess, nice. I don't know. Because it is still so bleak and still we don't have access we need, obviously. So not good, but less bad than expected.
It does. It does. I mean, I hear you. I think the Roe marker, I guess is what I'll call it, because I can't call it an anniversary. What is it?
Yeah.
No. I mean, whatever
Decision
it is,
day?
it's no longer is the point. I think, yes, it's true. The administration could have, within its first year, taken more aggressive steps at rolling back what is left of national abortion access, right? There are things that they could have done, and I'm not suggesting that I think that that's, means it's not going to happen. I will say that sure. I think the thing to really watch for the rest of this year is agency action around mifepristone. This is where the, sort of sharks are circling, so to speak. And it's happening on a couple different fronts, right? So we have active litigation still around mifepristone access and telehealth in particular, and pills by mail. Conservatives and the anti-choice movement really, really, really do not like pills by mail. It upsets their whole deal. It really is the genie out of the bottle for them. And the harder it is for them to rein in that access, the more amplified the attacks on medication abortion are going to come. So we've got litigation that I mentioned, and it's just the sort of, hangover from the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine, the case that will not die in some ways. And so I am keeping an eye on that. There's nothing immediately worthwhile to talk about that case, except that, they just keep on trying. And, we know this, Imani and I were reminiscing about the days of 20-week bans on the podcast and how quaint that time felt by comparison, right? Yeah. We also know that folks like Students for Life have the ear of this administration, and in particular Health and Human Services, which has, proven itself to just be a grift machine. And boy, can nobody grift like the anti-choice movement. So the FDA and HHS are both undergoing administrative action around mifepristone, whether it's safety and efficacy, approval generally, whether mifepristone is fallen into the water supply and turning frogs gay, or whatever nonsense that Kristen Hawkins is out there peddling with Students for Life. They are taking quote unquote serious agency action on that. And so that could look like rolling back or removing entirely mifepristone from the American marketplace. This is, again, one of those awkward places where, is it Big Pharma that's going to come in and sort of save the day on this? I don't know. Bobby Kennedy really believes all of the nonsense around health. I just don't know what else to call. I have other words to call it, but I'm trying to keep this from you getting censored and, in any sort of, but it's even Dr. Oz and, we don't talk about the damage that running CMS into the ground will do around some of these things, because it's really complicated. But I guess what I'm saying, Jenny, is I'm glad that you have found a space where you're like, this feels better. I feel really worried about what will happen midterm-ish.
Oh, for sure.
There is going, and also there's going to be some, we're going to get a Lauren Handy where there's a bunch of, they're going to gin up a story, right? Like, this is an administration that is based in professional wrestling and reality TV. They wag the dog on the American public all the time. And I feel like the media just does not get that part of it. So we'll get a story that's going to do something, and it's going to all be bullshit like they usually are, So that really does kind of stress me out, because we know when that happens, then the threats immediately trickle down to providers. The misinformation is the kind of thing that puts people's lives and, at real risk. We're already seeing that. After the collapse of Roe, talk about, it's the same in the abortion care economy, right? Clinics don't just open after they've been closed. Right. Providers that are run out don't just pick up their practice after a brief sabbatical. We're still building back that infrastructure, which is why pills by mail is so important, because they can't stop it. So there's that. And we're seeing the battle over shield laws really heat up. And I anticipate that it's going to be a Supreme Court decision. We see Louisiana just try to indict a provider out of California. And, California ignored that subpoena, as they rightly should, or indictment, same with New York. I'm sure Colorado will get one at some point. They're going to keep trying. And, that's just from the Trump administration. We've got South Carolina trying to bring in fetal personhood in the legislative session. Tennessee trying to bring in fetal personhood in a legislative session. It's almost like the Trump administration has given, abortion advocates so many horrors and so many ways to try to wrap their arms around, that now the bad actors in the states really have some oxygen and some runway to play with. And God bless the lawyers, man, who are out there doing the work of delaying and defending and pushing this stuff away, because it feels probably pretty thankless right now. And I'm just here to say thank you.
Yeah. And I also just want to say, like, definitely not good news, but seeing it as maybe like harm reduction of like,
oh, for sure.
The terrible things I was expecting had not happened yet. And it was definitely a yet.
It's a version of harm reduction, right?
Yeah.
Like that's really all that we can do right now is various exercises in harm reduction.
And then the other thing I've been keeping an eye on, because I can just feel those two pieces coming together, is the nonsense around Tylenol. And you cannot convince me that they are not mentioning Tylenol by name versus acetaminophen, because we talk about mifepristone being as safe as Tylenol. Yep. You cannot tell me that is not why that was the statement. And I see those two pieces going to come together.
Completely. I mean, again, an administration that is narrative driven, not policy driven, narrative driven, right? WWE, like professional wrestling and reality TV. Yeah. It's all pre-scripted. And I think that that's really smart. Just like, we've apparently got 3 pregnancies in this administration right now, right? I mean, it's not subtle.
Okay. What are you keeping an eye on? It's January. A parade of horribles is coming. Like, what are you keeping an eye on this year?
I am keeping an eye on the mental health of my friends and family and myself first and foremost. I say that, with a laugh in my voice, but really I mean seriously. That. Like a year in, everybody who is listening to this podcast, please take care of yourselves and your community, because the idea is to run us into the ground and then run us over. And we can't let that happen. And so this isn't like, light a candle and drink some tea. I mean, that's great. Do that. But also really take whatever is necessary to protect your health at this time and build community. So that's not just like, crawl into your cocoon, but, really make the efforts at connecting in real life as you can in spaces with folks who help you feel seen and supported and whole. So that is my very honest number one priority this year. In terms,
as somebody who is a cocoon person, I really always need to hear that, because that is my first instinct, is the cocooning.
And it's a good instinct, honestly. Like, I spent a lot of time just kind of like tucking in and taking care. But really what we are seeing in DC, in Minneapolis, in the places where the administration has brought in federal troops, is an attempt to dissolve community bonds. And the effective strategy of resistance is to strengthen those bonds. And so you and I, in our cocoon state, also need to challenge ourselves for one piece of in real life meaningful connection that is analog. Yeah. This is about building really, truly like the things we can touch and, feel in this moment. So there's that. In terms of in the legal, progressive and conservative legal spaces that I'm keeping an eye on, I mentioned the shield laws, because this is, as we've seen on so many things, abortion is so often the tip of the spear in other larger policy battles. And so if states that are run by progressives and Democrats don't have the ability to pass policies, whatever they happen to be, abortion related or not, that serve the needs of their constituents in a way that protects those constituents, and the federal government can just override that, or not even the federal government in this case, a different state. If we're going to Texas and Louisiana, the whole country, we need to be having a conversation about that, because it's not just about abortion then. And we know that will extend beyond it. We're already seeing it, whether it's, trying to restrict attempts to provide support for gender affirming care, whatever it is, right? Because that's a federalism, that's a state of the democracy kind of issue that I think, because of the horrors, is going largely underreported. I'm also a year into this administration. We're going to start hearing some of the fallout of these policies in place. And like we saw with Dobbs, right? We knew that there would be a reported death. We just didn't know when it would happen and where exactly it would happen. And so I'm waiting for that in some of the other contexts. And I think the pending attacks on, we've talked about abortion, but really hormonal birth control for women, because of Bobby Kennedy's presence in Health and Human Services and the coordinated mis and disinformation campaign right now, the Tylenol, mifepristone connection, all of those things that you are talking about, the infrastructure from the conservative side is there to do an entire scare campaign. They already are doing it on social media, and translate that into policy. And, I expect we'll see that. Probably with minors access first, because that's usually how it goes. You also can't talk about gender-affirming care bans without talking about birth control, because most of it's hormones. So anyway, it's just, those are some dire spaces. And I think, to sort of end it on more of a sci-fi note, the longer the pronatalist movement gets any oxygen and taken seriously, the more terrifying we're going to see the policy outcomes. I used to joke about the tech bros talking to me about things like an artificial womb as a way to, quote unquote, solve the abortion problem. But yeah, we're actually going to start to see some of those things floated as in real life policies, and what that means for women who want autonomy.
Oh, okay. That was bleak.
I'm sorry.
I know.
Can we do a happy hour episode where we
yes.
I don't know.
We need to do that sometime.
I mean, I know that bleak is kind of my brand, but at the same time, I don't
look out the window, right?
Yeah, and I don't want folks to feel disempowered. I really,
see, you just know where I was going. What can people do?
They can directly support mutual aid organizations of all kinds right now. Everything is about attacking families of a particular kind that are not very wealthy and white and conservative. The DOGE cuts that happened at the beginning of the year, we're still feeling at food shelves in states and localities. So immigration, I know of families in Minnesota who are organizing and supporting others who cannot leave the house. This is really happening across the country right now. So first and foremost, support mutual aid organizations of all kind. Organize as you can in your lane. Whenever I'm here, I remind folks that everybody has a lane. You might not be a protest girly. That may not be your lane, and that is okay. You may have fantastic administrative skills. And guess what? Right now, we need people who can run an Excel spreadsheet. So
don't look at me for that one.
Me either, man. I never. Nope, not me. That is not my skill set. But it is needed for folks who are coordinating deliveries to folks who can't leave their house, who are shopping for multiple families at a time, who are managing communications and points of contact. Put your administrative skills to use. I guarantee you there's a neighborhood organization that would be over the moon to have help with that. And, check in on yourself and your friends and your family. We get ourselves through this. We save ourselves. Nobody's coming in to take care of this. This is not a Michael Bay movie. It is not wrapped up neatly in the end. We save ourselves.
Jess, as always, it is so much fun talking to you about such terrible, terrible things.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me back.
Okay, y'all, I hope you loved my conversation with Jess. Like I said, I always love talking to her. It is so much fun, and I always learn so much. So thank you, Jess, and I will see everybody next week. If you have any questions, comments, or topics you would like us to cover, always feel free to shoot me an email. You can reach me at Jennie, Jennie, at reprosfightback.com, or you can find us on social media. We're at rePROs Fight Back on Facebook and Twitter, or rePROs FB on Instagram. If you love our podcast and want to make sure more people find it, take the time to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Or if you want to make sure to support the podcast, you can also donate on our website at reprosfightback.com. Thanks all.